About three chapters. Now we take up the fourth chapter, and in it we have up to now covered this ground that individual consciousness has a truth supporting it, and so has a collective consciousness also a reality behind it. These two things are aspects or working out of one central truth. Individual also has a truth which supports it, a reality behind. Collectivity also has a truth which supports it and is behind it. And this collectivity, regarded as a subjective consciousness, has not been properly viewed by intellectuals in the past. They have thought of collective growth as something objective. They have taken an objective view of collective consciousness. Objective in the sense that they thought that it is a, collective life is a thing to be studied as a as something that happens under pressure of economic forces, social customs, political relations, wars, and they did think that collectivity is something subjective. It was thought that collectivity is something objective. And under stress of various political, economic, social, and other forces, a collectivity moves. So that you could regard collectivity almost objectively as something to be studied outside, as if it has no subjectivity of its own. That is how an objective view of collective life has been, well, one of the prominent views is the objective aspect. And though the conception of the nation as a collectivity and as an entity has emerged, the fact of the national consciousness as an entity of collective life has come forward, but still the view of history has remained what it was, an objective view in which the growth of the collective consciousness is not viewed as a psychological movement, but as an objective movement under external forces, action and reaction, creating a sort of a movement which you can study like a experiment in a laboratory or an event or an object. And this motive of objectivity has dominated historical outlook. And the only force that is admitted in history as subjective is individuality. The individual has to be regarded as subjective force. And therefore, another view has also emerged in the interpretation or significance of history, that history is nothing else but the biography of great men. If you take certain epochs and relegate them to the life of the individual, well, you will have the mark or you will have the graph of the progress of humanity. So that history is not something like an objective movement, but something that owes its very progress or its very existence to subjectivity, to human individuals. That the individual is really the maker of history. If you study the growth of collective life and see how it has been working, there is another view different from the objective in which you can look at it as a working out or an effect produced by certain individuals. That means subjectivity. So that certain individuals alone have made history, so to say, made what is now called history. It is not something that can be studied absolutely objectively. And even though we said that the soul of the nation has come into being, still the objective attitude in history seems to dominate in many schools of thought. And we hear of the soul of the nation, nations that are trying to make this soul operative or active consciously in their life and in their action. And especially this is felt in the rise of the new nations that are on the verge of acquiring their freedom or that are struggling for freedom, because their objective life is very poor. If you study the life of those nations that are under domination of other nations, you will see that they have objectively, well, there is very little to give them any historical background. Objectively, they are poor. Organization, money, economics, political power, army. You will find that they haven't got any of those factors which can be objectively studied. What they have is a strong subjective feeling of the nationhood. And this is very peculiar that you can look at this phenomenon more easily as a subjective movement if you look at the rise of new nations that are trying to acquire freedom or that have recently acquired freedom. You will see that even though their objective life, when subjectively they are very poor and there is nothing much in their favor, still subjectively they are able to make themselves effective. So their objective is objective life being feeble, like countries like Ireland or India, for instance, and not solely for ourselves, but it is necessary to be conscious of our national soul, but also if we want really to be objective in collective life, one has to realize the consciousness of his own nation, but at the same time to know that other nations also have a consciousness. That it is not only one's own national consciousness that is all pervading and that is everything. Every nation has its national consciousness, so that you have to respect the consciousness of other nations also. If you look at it subjectively, then the subjective nationhood is not only in the nation to which one belongs, but also to other nations, which are equally organized and equally alive. And he gives the instance of Germany as typical subjective nation that came to the surface with this idea of the nation. See, it is a German nation that for the first time realized this strong subjective element as a necessary binding force. The mistake that it committed was that it mistook its vital soul for its true self, its vital being for its true self. The true soul of Germany, if you want to feel it as a nation, well, you can see that it is that which expresses itself or which can be seen from, inferred from personalities like Kant, Hegel, Fichte, Nietzsche, Goethe, Beethoven. You understand? I think Wagner. They represent the German. Yes, that is the German nationhood. That is the soul. Now, instead of this real subjectivity which is expressed in these people in various fields, that you will see that is something coming out from the very being of the nation. What they mistook was that they thought that the misapplication of theory of Nietzsche as interpreted by Triste, I think. Is it not? How is it pronounced? Triste, T-R-I-S-T-H-T. I don't know how they pronounce German names. It's very difficult. Yeah. But Triste pronounced, he misapplied the theory of supermanhood of Nietzsche, you see. And the result was mistaking of the vital self or vital soul, vital being for the soul. So Germany thought that, well, I have a soul, and it mistook the ego for the self, really speaking, you see. And it mistook really false subjectivity for true subjectivity, because ego is not the true subjectivity of either the individual or the nation. It is a false subjectivity. And it mistook the false subjectivity for the true one. And if one realizes the true subjectivity, then one knows that in all there is the one truth that is working. When one is in the sight of, or one has the experience of his true subjective element or being, well, one realizes that the being that one has is the same in others. This is the sign that one is in contact with his true being. Completely deprived of or exclusive of all sense of egoism. You see, that is a sign of the true self of anybody, either the nation or the individual. That one is in contact with the true soul or true self, well, can be tested by the fact that if one feels that everybody or others have got the same soul, same truth, same divine element or essential truth in everybody. Well, if one feels this is exclusive to myself, there is something less than the self. It may be a negative aspect, or it may be a partial aspect, or it may be a false subjectivity. Now, and this misapplication came by in this form. If it had realized that it had the national soul, it would have seen that other nations have also the same truth of the soul, their own truth, but they have a truth of their own soul. It would not be the logic that it pursued was very queer. I don't know how many of you remember the logic. It was only the will to live and will to power, which was applied, you see, to life. That the purpose of life is to, first of all, live, and then to acquire, to attain power, so as to be able to dominate others or to exercise your power over other people. And that is true that there is will to live and will to know, will to power, but it is not in the egoistic sense. And secondly, it must be supplemented by the will to know and will to perfection. It's not merely will to live and will to power, and these two have not to be applied egoistically, will to live and will to power, because everybody will have the same will or will have to be given the same will. And then and that's why it argued like that is the will working in others and working in me. We are superior nation. Our evolution and our domination is good for human evolution. That is the logic. You will see Kraft and other book if you read. That is the logic which comes out. That Germany is the top nation in the world. I mean, the most superior nation in the world, and its coming to the top is good for humanity. Therefore, well, and the only relation between states is, well, war. There is no other relation possible. Either you listen to what I say, or I make you listen to what I want you to listen to. You see, and double standard was applied by Germany, that the individual had to do what the state says. What the state will do with regard to humanity, well, what the state wants to do. So that it didn't follow one standard of life, you see. With regard to the individual, the state had to dominate and dictate to the individual what he had to do. With regard to humanity, well, the state had to flout humanity. By the same logic, what it would have done was to obey the good of humanity. Instead, it said that our coming to the top is good for humanity, and therefore we will come to the top in order to lead humanity to a greater and higher culture. You see, that was the illusion under which the whole working was done. And will to be and will to know was not the only thing, but will to know and will to perfection also, they were lacking. And this would be possible if it is brought home to man, individual and in collectivity, that behind individuality and behind the collectivity there is a divine essence or divine element. The law of the collectivity was, the only relation between collectivity was war or conflict according to the German theory, you see. And the right to impose on another nation was necessary because Germany was the most advanced nation, and because that would help the evolution of mankind to a higher state of evolution. Survival was good for the good of humanity. It was good for the whole of human race. And organized state was brought into existence, and war was the main business of the state. This was the natural element, because it had to only deal with the other states on the basis of conflict and war. So the main business of state was war. So state existed in order to create efficiency for war, mainly. And what it took was, well, this mistake was responsible for creating a kind of opposition from other nations, and also create a world opinion, I mean, opinion of the whole humanity against that logic, because it went against the fundamental divinity of the individual and also the divinity of the collectivities. It lacked tremendous support from the human race, you see, because naturally, if German philosophy or theory of life had won, well, freedom of thought, association, or freedom of movement, or freedom of religious belief would be very strongly curtailed. for 100, 200 or 300 years. You don't know how long. It would depend on the lasting of the domination, you see. And the danger was that they would impose it under the plea that it was good for others. In fact, it was good for them to not to have free thought, you see, like that. It was good to follow our thought. That would be the dictation. You see, of every dictator or arbitrary power, when it comes to the top, it does the same thing. So he is pointing out in this chapter that subjective element has been operating in history, in social evolution, in the history and growth of collectivity. The subjective element has been coming to the front. And the subjective element first is in the form of individuals who have molded the course of history, and secondly, it is in the form of, well, you can say, distorted subjectivity of vital egoism, like nations, like Germany, who brought the subjective element, by the wrong end, or you can say that brought wrong subjectivity into existence in collective life. Well, that acted as a great lesson to the other collectivities and to humanity. Now, in the next chapter, what he is dealing with is, where is it? Yes, perhaps there is a little time for the next chapter, or I don't know, get mixed up. This is the fifth chapter, yes. No, this is the fifth chapter, not yet the sixth. This psychological knowledge tells us that we have, or man has, various planes of existence, or you can say various fronts of his psychological being. The self of man is not one dimensional. There are various dimensions of the self of man. And this self does not exist. We are seeing that in the case of collective life, like the nations of German, who applied it on the vital plane. But there is the deeper plane where the soul of the entity exists. Well, here we have many formal and frontal surface representative selves in us. And even in spite of this objective view and partially subjective attitude which nation or collective life has taken up, there are departments of life, as we already saw yesterday, in which even in collective life and its activity, this subjective element has made itself felt. One was education, as I referred to yesterday. That in the realm of education, in collective life, the attitude has been to treat the child as a free agent, as a free soul, entitled to freedom from childhood, to as much freedom as is consonant with its safety, with its growth to a normal human nature and human being. Well, complete freedom is now admitted as a right. That's one. Secondly, the treatment of the criminals also, which we referred to one day before, that shows that the collective life is taking more and more subjective attitude towards man even. You see, formally, as I told you, children are regarded as property of these parents, or at least, things to be guided, ignorant little things and so on. People forgot that they had been children themselves, but and they don't belong to property of anyone. They are independent souls, and after all, they have their own fulfillment to follow. The criminal also was regarded as somebody who was antisocial, and therefore the only attitude was punishment. Now the attitude is that he is a subjective being and that he has to be corrected, and his behavior as a criminal might be due to some injustice of society itself. So these two particularly show the increasing angle of subjectivity being adopted in even collective life. Now it is chapter 6. He draws attention to 2 or 3 new factors in this chapter. The growth of science, he believes, has created this tendency towards vital egoism, vitalistic ego. Science has promoted the attitude of man as a vital ego more than anything else. That is one. And it has also given prominence to idea of collectivism. Collectivist idea, as they call it, not communist exactly, but collectivist. Communism is only an application of this collectivist attitude, but science has led to that. You see, it is science that first made discoveries of material energy and found out application to life. With the result that people thought that life is for comfort and enjoyment, and well, it is in order to cater to one's comfort that these discoveries are made, not for seeking the truth. You see, truth of matter, truth of energy, truth of life, truth of world, and so on. No, it was to add to man's comforts, conveniences of life, and therefore it has given a great, you can say, great push to the vital egoistic life of man. And secondly, it has promoted a collectivist outlook. And this collectivist outlook is just the opposite of this vital ego. In the collectivist outlook, you have to control the individual. In the vital ego, you see the individual seeks his own satisfaction of impulse, satisfaction of desire, or satisfaction of ambition. He is not going to submit easily to the collectivist idea if he can help it. Because why does science lead to this emphasis on collectivism? Because science sees that nature wants uniformity. Nature wants to preserve the collectivity. In the study of nature which science has to follow, it finds that nature always wants to preserve the collectivity, the type, so to say. And so the type has to be preserved. And for preservation of the type, well, the type must dominate over the individual. The type is to be preserved by preserving the collectivity. And if the individual vital ego wants satisfaction, well, it is not to be allowed. These are two contradictory things given by science. You see, on one side it encourages vital enjoyment and vital satisfaction and vital ego. On the other side, it promotes also a collectivist view in which the individual cannot be allowed to do what it likes and satisfy itself in the way it likes. And so the German nationalism commit this double mistake of compressing the individual by the collective force, using the collectivity against the individual, and the individual nation and national egoism against humanity. So this double mistake of the German nation, you see. And science also gave this view that everything was to be studied objectively because everything was a thing. Or if you put it in the terms of Einstein, well, everything is an event. This is an event. You see, this is not an object. And event is to be studied objectively. You have to put your mind to it. So you take man. Well, you say, now I'm going to study objectively. This has been the difficulty of modern thinking all over in all fields of life. Psychology wants to become like physical science. It wants to become like physics and chemistry. It doesn't know that it cannot become, because the subject matter of physics and chemistry is quite different from subject matter of psychology. Psychology is study of man's inner being. Chemistry and physics study of structure of matter and behavior of energy. How can the two go together? But they want to make it a science. Now, if how can it be objective? I still fail to understand, except you can put man and say he has so much weight, therefore he is so much matter. That's all right. But man having weight does not give any idea of his impulse or his emotion or his thought or his inner being or his inner constitution. It doesn't carry near the reality at all, you see. And that's why I said that unless you find the weight of a thought, you have no right to call it a science. You must find out the weight of a thought. Then you can call it a science afterwards. Well, when you take up this objective attitude and reduce everything to a thing, then your attitude is to observe everything, find out its behavior and make a law. And this law is outside the thing that you observe. Law is outside. Law is not inside the thing. Law is what you get from outside. The subjective attitude is quite different. Subjectivism starts from inside, from within. And its belief is that the law is within. Law is not outside. Law is to found out inside, not outside. And the psychologists are trying to find the law outside. The law is within. From the subjective, if you start with subjectivity, you have to look within, because the law cannot be brought from outside. And there the progress is by observation and by coming to a conclusion and drawing, a law by studying experiments or behavior of many objects or studying many facts. You arrive at a law, and the law is outside the objects or the things which you have studied. Here in the inner, when you start from within, the law is also within, and there you progress only by means of self-consciousness. That is, by increasing your self-consciousness and self-realization. You don't increase by a study of more and more facts and getting a law from outside, but by study of the growth of consciousness. And consciousness itself leads you to self-realization, the growth of consciousness, by action of a law from within. And from the point of view of subjectivity, reason is only a means or an instrument. And there are many powers of knowledge besides reason available to man. Reason is not the only power. You can say it is the one power that gives you the most applicable knowledge of nature and physical life. But there are other sources of knowledge available to man. His emotional being, his sensational being, or his intuitive capacity. His intuition gives him also knowledge. And reason is not the only avenue of acquiring knowledge. In both objective and subjective view, we may concentrate on the individual or we may stress the collective consciousness. Science discovers a universal force, nature it calls. So the subjective also can find out a universal being. The claim of science is that our laws, which we find out, are common to all. That is, we talked on the first day when we began the subject matter, that the quick application and acceptance of science was that it offered an alternative to the religious attitude in which one's experience cannot be accepted as authentic by everybody. Whereas in science, the claim was that scientific knowledge or experimental, proof is available to everybody. Now, here he is pointing out that in both these methods, we may concentrate on the individual, we may concentrate on the collective. And as science has discovered a universal force of nature, so the subjective attitude also can lead us to a universal being, or a subjective outlook may consider the physical, vital, and mental ego only as instruments. And if you only adopt the objective attitude, then you will have to adopt the vitalistic or mental attitude that man is only body, or man is only life, or man is only mind. You will go only thus far and not further. In the subjective attitude, leave the attitude open to say that there can be a spiritual essence in man, a spiritual attitude or spiritual entity, the soul, which can be using or which may be using his mind, his life, and his body as its instruments. But if you adopt the subjective attitude, you also arrive at a generalization for all men because the self is universal. That self is nobody's property. The self, when realized, is not individual in the sense of exclusively, an individual's separate entity. It is one that at once puts the individual in rapport with all, because the essential divinity is common to all. With a variation that adopts an individual attitude, the essential divinity is common to all mankind. And therefore the true self or true soul, when realized, always makes one feel or perceive the same essential divine element in all, because it is universal. With a variation meant for the individual manifestation, the element is universal. Well, he is pointing out that as science finds out laws which are universally applicable to nature, subjective tendency also can lead you to an experience which can lead you to a general spiritual substratum which is common to all. Then next he formulates in the 7th chapter the ideal law of social development. The ideal law of social development. If society is to develop, what should be its law? And there, the same law almost, but differently enunciated that we saw in ideal of human unity is put down here. There, the form of it was, what is it? Yeah, variation. Unity and variety, was it not? Yeah, unity and variation. Yes, unity and variation. And here it is freedom and law. You see, freedom and law. Now, he is trying to show that you look at the whole existence around, everything that you meet, material, living, vegetable kingdom, animal kingdom, and humanity. It is infinite. Existence is an infinite, well, an infinite or infinity. It is real in the sense of an illimitable reality. There is no limit to its extent, to its being, to its consciousness, to its power. It figures itself out in multiple values of life. Different strata, different rung of ladder of life it manifests. The grass, the insect, the animal, like that you find it. The way in which it manifests its the existence is multitudinously various. You take Earth. Earth itself has any number of variations, though not as varied as something living. Earth is regarded as something which is inert, which is not quite true, but still, if you take it even as inert, Earth has sufficient variation. It's not all same Earth. And not only from the way in which you see the coloration of the Earth, composition of the Earth, the contour of the Earth, and so on, you will see that Earth offers sufficient number of variations, though limited, you can say. But when you come to life, the variation becomes more multiple, more and more increase in its range. The range of variation in life is great, unlimited practically. And when you come to man, the variation becomes so intense that each one can be said to be unique variation of the whole mental world. Mind and life and body, if that is the constitution of man's nature, then in man this tendency to variation attains a stage where each individual becomes absolutely unique. And so the principle of variation is applied almost to every member of the species, so to say. The variation principle applies to everyone because everyone is a variation. You cannot make two individuals absolutely one. You cannot have two individuals who are absolutely the same in every respect. This is not possible to find in mind. So in mind, the variation becomes very much so effective as to distinguish every individual as a separate variation. You cannot put a class of variation in humanity. Even when there is a class, each one again in the class will be unique and special to himself. This greatest power of individuality distinguishes man from other creatures. He can become master by identity with his will and with his self. His great chance is that if he develops himself, he can become master of himself. Whether the creation that is below man, has no chance of changing the variation in which he is put. The variation is there and it is fixed. Well, for man, there is a chance for change. So to arrive at the spirit which expresses itself in all nature and to become one with and express and realize his destiny on earth, man has the greatest chance. Man has the greatest chance to know that which is his deepest self that which is behind the earth, that which is behind life, and that which is working in the universe, so to say. To arrive at the spirit which expresses itself in whole of nature, to become one and to express in individuality and in collective life on earth and to fulfill his destiny is a possibility for man. And generally we find that an individual does this work. The collectivity does not do this work as a group. But when the individual does it, you will realize that individual cannot do it for himself. When individual has done it for himself, he has done it for the group. Automatically it applies to the group. You see, the change which individual attains by his personal effort towards finding his own self, finding the self of nature or the universe, well, if he succeeds in doing to the extent that he does, well, he also makes it available to all, makes it available to the collective life. He does not do it for himself individually in the exclusive sense, but for all, for the race. In fact, for the world. You see. And because the will that is acting in the individual to find out himself or find out his truth, find out his reality, is a universal will. Why it so happens is that the individual, when he sets to make this search for himself, he thinks it is his own individual will. It is not his individual will, it is a universal will deputed into him. It is the universal will finding one, unit where it can operate, but the will is universal. Therefore, when the individual marches or succeeds in making a progress, in satisfying the will to know the self or know the reality, know the truth, it automatically is applicable to all because the will was not his own. The will was universal. He was only, you see, it is like a lamp. Now lamp is lighted here. Now lamp may say that I am lighted for myself, but it belongs to the dynamo, you see. The power, the whole existence of the lamp is due to the dynamo. Lamp has no separate existence as lamp. It exists because there is a dynamo. If the dynamo was not, there would be no lamp. And the will that is acting here at the one particular point of manifestation, will to know the self, know the truth, know the reality, to reach perfection. When a man wants and strives to get perfection, he acts as if he was an individual, and it is true that as if you limit your view only to him, you find he alone is doing it. It is true that he alone has to do it. But then the will that is in him is universal will, and when he succeeds, you find that other people can do it. Other people always do it. Whatever his difficulty may be, as soon as he has attained the aim which is set before him, he finds that the road is open to all others. Because the will in him is universal. You must realize this great truth, that the individual is only an instrument, is determined very strongly. This is such a strong realization now, that these people who are philosophers in various lines of cultural activity, they are now trying to find out how far man is free. They are feeling very strongly that everything is determined. Whatever impulse inner being gets is predetermined. But Gita said it hundreds of years ago, and they are not only trying to rediscover. Gita said thousands of years ago, and we have discussed it threadbare, this question, that there are two rhythms of nature available to man. One is the lower rhythm and a higher rhythm. In the lower rhythm, there is determinism pure and simple. Man is never free because he is under ego, and ego is an instrument of nature. Finished. That's all. Ego is an instrument of nature, so whatever he determines under ego is determined. You can say you can't determine it scientifically in a laboratory because this is a living laboratory. But philosophically it is determined. He is not free agent because he is ego. And ego is an instrument of nature. Nature makes him do what she likes. He thinks that he is doing it, but that sense is given to him to get her work done. The sense of I is given to the individual so that he may become a willing instrument of what nature wants him to do. When a man falls in love, Well, he thinks that he is doing everything independently. It's not at all true, because the whole universal impulse is driving him, and he is only a helpless instrument, almost in the hand of the universal impulse. And nature is making him do what nature wants him to do, while all the time he is thinking he is quite free, which is not true at all. The freedom is absolutely, it's only illusory. If nature didn't give him, man won't be willing, victim of what she wants him to do. So to create this willingness, this false sense of I as the doer, the egoistic sense, really speaking, is the instrument in the hand of nature to help nature. And I pointed out to you that thing, that when nature has finished her purpose, the same individual is not able to do what he wants to do. Let him decide to do something, and he will find that when nature has withdrawn her consent, well, nothing can be done. Because nature has withdrawn the consent, and he is now an individual who has to live a life which is mechanically, more or less, wait up to the end and finish himself. That's all. What she wanted from him has been done. The contribution is taken. This happened in the case of greatest of persons sometimes, They got out Napoleon and, many of the great people who did change the course of human history. Well, once the work that they had to do was finished, when they are put aside, same individual, the same capacity, nothing happens. Afterward, no change can be brought about. It is nature that intended and brought about what was essential. Now, to arrive at the, yes, when man does it, he does it for the world and for the race, because the will in him that is acting is universal will. From this point of view, the object of society should be, first, to provide conditions of life and growth by which man may travel towards perfection. That is first object. First object of society should be to provide conditions of life in which the individual can grow and travel or move towards perfection. Second object would be to express in the general life of the group or collectivity the light, the power, and you can say the reality of the self of collective life, the true self of the group. To express the collective soul in mental activity, in vital activity, in emotional activity, in artistic activity. And for these two things, two aims, to go give to the individual a field for growth towards perfection. And second, to express the collective soul in cultural activity. Two things that are needed are freedom and harmony. Freedom and harmony are the two laws. Two principles which give you the variation and oneness. Freedom and harmony, you see. Freedom gives you variation and harmony gives you oneness in collective life. To realize and combine these two, that is the effort of man in his individual and collective life. He wants to see how to combine freedom with harmony. Everybody must be completely free to do what he likes, and yet there should be no conflict. There should be no disharmony. This is a problem, because you see, freedom gives you variation, because if you dictate, then variation will go, and variation is the richness of life. You see, without variation there is no rich expression, there is no in fact there is uniformity, and therefore it will be dull and uninteresting. In fact, it won't be manifestation at all. Variation, it is that gives the richness of life. So freedom is necessary to give the variation necessary. But if only freedom acts in a collective life, well, there will be no collective life. There must be harmony. So this striking a balance between freedom and harmony is the effort of man in his individual and collective life. He wants to find out how far he should allow harmony to govern his, to restrict his individuality. And the definition of freedom must be therefore freedom of the inner being and not freedom of the outer egoistic nature of man. If freedom is given to vital or mental or physical ego, it will always lead to not freedom but license, or you can say to a sort of freedom which will always create conflict. You see, it is true freedom of the soul that will put him in automatic rhythm or harmony with all others. The moment one gets into the inmost soul, which is his true entity, his true individuality, he will find that he is in harmony with everybody else. Disharmony comes only when he stresses an egoistic aspect of his nature. Vital ego, mental ego, physical ego, national ego, collective ego, and so on. Well, that only creates conflict or points of clash. But if he attains or realizes or experiences his true self or true being, it automatically puts him in harmony with others so far as the self is concerned. And the problem would be how to mold his nature, his mind, his life, his vital nature to obey his soul so as to create outer harmony of life. That is man's problem of collective life. Now, universal being, mankind is the self-expression of this cosmic being, really speaking. And because mankind expresses the mental power of this cosmic existence, the whole cosmic being, if it had a mental being, well, you can see it expressing itself in man. So that mankind is nothing else but the mental power of cosmic existence. Universal existence expressing its mental power is mankind. Yes. And all mankind therefore is one. Because cosmic power is expressing itself in mind, as mind in mankind. And as it is expression of a cosmic power, well, all mankind is one, in spite of all differences. And what is important is not one individual or two individuals, but the whole march of the race. As a mental expression of the universal soul, humanity has to march. We are not to take only into consideration the progress only of the individual. And yet each human being, this is very, very difficult to grasp, but it is a real, understanding of man. He says that even though the whole of mankind is the expression of the universal self expressing itself in mind, yet each individual sums up the whole of human potentiality in his being. You see? The whole mankind is one, and each individual sums up the whole potentiality of human race within himself. There is oneness, and in each one there is a universal or unlimited potentiality also given. He called it, as I told in one of the evening talks, man is a fragment and a residue. A fragment and a residue. Externally, if you look, he looks like a fragment, but he's one of the whole. You see, fragment of the whole. And he's a residue of the process, so that all the elements that were in the pot are in him. The residue contains every element. So every human being holds the potentiality of the whole human race within himself. And yet, the universal existence or universal being expresses itself as mind in the whole of mankind. Mankind is the mental expression of the universal Purusha, universal being. Universal self expressing itself in mind, well, becomes mankind. The mankind is one as an expression of the universal being. And yet each individual holds the whole potentiality of mankind within himself, so that each is macrocosm and the microcosm are one. The microcosm holds the whole of the macrocosm within himself. one individual is charged with the potentiality of the whole race. And the whole race is one in the expression of the cosmic being. Yes. Whole race is unified or united in being the expression of the mental consciousness of the cosmic Purusha. So the cosmic Purusha becomes a mental being in man, and in man, each individual holds the entire possibility of the race within himself. That's how you have to look at this process. And in this, the problem is how to correlate, how to balance freedom and harmony. How to balance freedom and harmony. Of course, the individual lives for all, means for the world, but he can help only by and help only in proportion as he attains his own self. He cannot help by not being himself. Individual lives for others, but he does not live for others in the mental sense of the term. That is what it's most difficult to convey to modern mind, because it always thinks to work for others is to do something externally, run about, pass a resolution, start a committee, start an organization, do some social work and say, I will improve everyone, and no time to look at himself. He's very busy with correcting everyone else and thinking that what he's correcting is the right thing. And in fact, there was a man who was discussing with us, you see, you connected with this Keskar, you see, movement of Keskar. They were arguing on the basis of Keskar's teaching. And I know Keskar's article was also to that effect. That God is only a conception, you see. It's a concept of man. A perfection concept which man is pursuing. And therefore, what one must do is to have socialization of virtue. We call it like that. Some virtues have to be socialized. Honesty, simplicity, charity, goodness, like that. A socialization of virtues will solve all men's problem. And therefore, what one must do is to busy himself with the good of mankind. So I asked him, how do you know what is the good of mankind? You assume that what you know is the good of mankind. Now, that is exactly to be proved. What is the good of mankind? In what consists the good of mankind? That is your own conception, just as you said that God is a conception made by man of a possible perfection, where your idea of good of mankind is your own conception. Because you are not going to realize it. That I can tell you even now before you try. You will never succeed in doing that. You are not going to succeed in it, because we have seen thousands of people doing it and the world is there. Something has happened, not that nothing has happened, but changing mankind, changing human nature is a job which greater than yourself have undertaken and not succeeded fully. They have brought some change in mankind, some conception of perfection, some effort, some progress also. Not that it is all retrogression, not that it is all failure and it's all illusion and nothing. But the claim that what one knows as good for others is good is to claim omniscience almost. How do you know that what is good for others? In this consists the good of mankind. How? Therefore, those who have the real sight of the problem or profound knowledge of prayer say, first find out what you are. It is the greatest service to others, because then you will know what would be good for them, because what is good for you in your inmost self will be certainly good for them in their inmost self. And your attaining to your true self will be a great help to others, because, well, that will set, vibrations of truth, reality and harmony all around you, apart from anything else that you will be able to do. Even if you do nothing, you will be living in a truth of inner life. And that automatically will create vibrations of truth around you. And what now is happening is that all around people are spreading vibrations of their own egoism, vital ideas, thoughts, conflict between aims and purposes. Well, each one is trying to pull this way and that way, and instead of lessening the tension, it is increasing. And once in the evening talk, we had to talk on, saving of mankind. So Sri Aurobindo said, well, I'm surprised that humanity still survives in spite of its saviors. I'm surprised it still survives.
Well, did the disciples want to save too, like all of us do? I mean, I thought maybe being associated so close with our Buddha, they wouldn't.
No, that we were talking about some topic about like this one. You see, there are always efforts, and it's good. I don't say that these efforts should be discouraged by us openly, because you can't replace them, and they won't be able to do anything better. So it is better they do something than sit idle and be tamasic, inert, and dull. It's better they do something, but that is not the direction or work in the right direction if they want to change mankind. If they say want to set right a social wrong, political wrong, economic wrong, yes, you go about outward method. It's quite all right. Organize, have meeting, have organization, fees, president, secretary, treasurer, all is necessary then. You have to do all that things because that's the procedure and right. But when you want to say, I want to change mankind, then all that is, unless you want to satisfy your ego that I am doing marvelous work and something is terrible going on, and you know how much we have 80,000 members, we have 1 lakh of members, we have so 1 million funds in the bank, and our followers are all over the world and so on. Well, it's a good thing to satisfy yourself, but no change has taken place. Change hasn't taken place. No change is there. Change will be there inside, and that change will be one that will first set yourself in harmony, which is the most important thing. You know what you are and what you must do and what you must not do. Wonderful knowledge. That is exactly what man hasn't got. He doesn't know what he must do. And he does just exactly what he shouldn't do very often. He rushes outside instead of turning inside. And then instead of getting his guidance from inside, he is busy with everything except himself. When he takes up any outer work, the only thing he attends to is outside, other people. He has hardly time to look at himself and find out what he is doing, whether he is doing rightly, whether he is egoistic, whether his motives are pure. Nothing of the kind. He is all the time extroverted. He is completely outward turned and has no time to look inward. In a work of that nature, the first thing is to look within. Well, there he is pointing out that here the individual does work for the world, of course, but he can help only in proportion as he becomes his own self. He uses what the collectivity has gathered. It is true. Individual doesn't start on his own capital. He starts on whatever collectivity has gathered for him. And yet, whatever he uses are his instruments. He is not indebted to them in the sense that, he is crushed under the burden of what collectivity has done. He takes advantage of whatever collectivity has done as his instrument. He gathers materials from mind, life, experience of the whole humanity. The individual gathers. But liberty is the divine instinct in man. He wants to be free to utilize that material as he likes. He wants to be free. He gets everything from everything, uses as his instrument. Individual belongs to the collectivity, and in modern times, this type of collectivity means the nation type. He helps humanity by enriching his national life, but he is greater than his nation. The individual can be greater than his nation. He can rise to the highest concept of divinity within himself, you see. He exceeds the nation, he belongs to humanity. He can even transcend. And this self-exceeding is possible for the individual. The animal is limited to its type. Man is not. Man can exceed. Self-exceeding is possible for the human type. You see, animal is fixed in the type. So to exceed the human formula, well, he can. From individual to the nation, nation to humanity, from there he may even realize his essential divinity. The nation has a right to be itself also in the same way, just as the individual has a compulsion upon him to realize his own true self. The nation also has a right to be its own self. And this right of nation to be its own self is in interest of humanity. It is good that each nation remains what it is and retains its true individuality, not its vital ego. This does not mean limitation into its own mold. Nation must also interchange and absorb and assimilate from each other. It is not that they must keep themselves confined, you see, in watertight compartments. They must absorb, interchange, and grow by mutual interchange and reciprocal giving. To have freedom to develop, that is true for the individual as well as for the nation. So freedom to develop must be there. Freedom is, that is the law. And then to harmonize life with the life of humanity, that is the task that is set before man. Humanity has to evolve towards God and express the divine in life, express the divine in individual and in collective life. And this is a difficult task for both the individual and the collectivity. But we are hopeful in the sense that knowledge is gradually increasing and diffusing all over, and rapid communication and capacity to understand is increasing on a large scale than ever before, and so on. And man is compelled to know other people, is compelled to come in contact with other people. And one day it should become possible to attain this aim of human life. You see, the harmony between the individual freedom and the law of harmony. You see, the freedom and the law of harmony would be compromised one day. Well, I think our 8th chapter we can wait for next time. This a rather little long one.
Is the self-expression of this cosmic being.
Yeah.
Mankind is a mental power of cosmic being.
Yes.
How do we get out of it? How do we go beyond mind almost? I mean, it must be, if mankind, what we have to do is quit being mankind, go beyond mankind, and become a spiritualized man, which is not human.
It is the universal soul or universal self, which is the self of the individual also. That if you study Life Divine, you will get it quite clear like daylight.
I'm going to study Life Divine since I get to it. But,
see, the transcendent, universal, and the individual are the three positions of one omnipresent reality. Reality is omnipresent. And that is the basis of this cosmos. Cosmos exists as an expression, as a manifestation of an omnipresent reality. Now this reality, when mind approaches it, when man approaches it, when sense approaches it, appears to stand on 3 points or 3 positions. This one omnipresent reality, absolutely identical, stands at 3 points. It stands at the individual point. It stands at the universal point. It stands at the transcendent point. But it is one. One in the sense of absolute identity.
Well,
that's all. So the mind is only an instrument. Mind is only an instrument to express this fundamental omnipresent reality. And the reality to be completely realized will require ascent of man from mind to a higher level of consciousness.
Well, that was what I asked. We would be called,
yes.
Like mankind is mental power. So what we go into, we make the transformation, not to mankind.
No, the first man has to realize that he is universal. First step, if he wants to go beyond his mental formula or human formula, is that he is universal. And that is what is the most difficult thing for man to realize. That he is not working, universal is working. The cosmic is working. In him, through him. Yes, that's it. So that all action is referred to that when it happens. And then, as Gita says, to something beyond the cosmos, the transcendent. So that the surrender of work or sacrifice of work is offered not to the ego, not to the immediate self, but to the cosmic self. And even beyond the cosmic self, to the transcendent self, of which the cosmos and the individual are manifestations or fields of action. You see? So what man has to do is not to remain confined to the mind, but realize that he is cosmic. That all his instruments are universal and cosmic and not his own. What acts in him is cosmos. What acts in him is the universe.
And when he does this, he will no longer be man, will he?
No, he will remain man because cosmic will work through individuals.
We can be
yes, the dynamo will work through lamps. The lamp, what lamp has to find out is that the power which it derives, the illumination it gives is not its own. That it is cosmic, that it comes from the dynamo. So if it can constantly know that it is a dynamo, then it will be in the dynamo all the time. And when it is in the dynamo, it will know which to switch off in order to do illumine what. You see? Which to put into operation in order to bring illumination where. It can't do it remaining here. If it goes there, then it finds out. And then it sees that even it derives its power from a transcendent source. And if it can constantly be in contact with that, then it knows why this play is here like this. Why things are like that.
I'm going to read Life Divine.
Mentality of oneself is the first step. That one is an instrument. First, an unconscious and ignorant instrument. Afterwards, a conscious and a willing instrument when you can sacrifice. The individual initiative is the bait of the ignorance.
In India, the women are organizing. I just read here about you go out after the outer means if you want to correct social businesses. So this is still all right to do the organizations and things if there is a social structure or something that needs to be corrected.
Yes. If you have any outer thing to be set right, I mean by getting votes or creating opinion, well then you have to resort to outer means because others are in the bargain.
No.
You see, if you want to change law of the city or law of the married life or something that is current in society, see, pass a law.
But if you
want to pass a law, then you can't do it alone because others will say we don't want the law.
No.
So then you have to say 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people must say yes to it. Well, in that case, you have to canvass opinion and get it.
Well, the school lunch program and things like that, this is good. School lunch program.
Yes. I don't understand your difficulty.
Well, I just read that the Indian women were organizing to get out and do some
Yes,
things.
that they will do because it's a social work.
Yes.
They are not out to improve society.
No, but
to perfect mankind. You see that if we do this, mankind difficulty will be solved. Nothing of the kind. You want to bring some change in some group or some angle of life or some corner of society or some activity of collective life, you can do it by taking others with you because that you can't do alone. The social work or national work cannot be done. You have to go to the legislature, municipality or some committee or create a committee or create a body to create opinion. And then everybody else will be there in the bargain. You cannot do it alone. You may be very sincere in your feeling, but it means nothing in collective life. It doesn't mean anything because others have to consent to it, is it not? You have to create what you call a social conscience or a social opinion. Bring about an inner change that you have to first direct your attention to your own self and not to others because the more you are busy with others, the more you forget yourself.
That's a good thing for American women to get through their head. There is a place for it, but there's also a place not for it, isn't it? Guide me over the thing I can't, that road that I can't see, that little red.